let's start with Hero Hei. He's back again. He made a new video, and I just want to talk mainly about this last section of his video. Now, I will of course, I will not cover the whole video because it does go over like like almost the same stuff that I've already covered yesterday and that he covered yesterday or a few days ago. So everyone already knows this. But this is what's interesting. The US Senator introduced new pirate site blocking bill. BlockBeard. The reason this is interesting is because pirate sites are known for basically being a way to bypass basically creating accounts with premium in sites that, for example, we don't feel like deserve our money. For example, like Crunchyroll, great example. They charge way too much. They have a monopoly over the entire anime industry in the Western side of things, and many people are rightfully allowed to basically pirate the anime for the animes that are in Crunchyroll. Because the thing that Crunchyroll does is that not only did they essentially take out their competition, Funimation, but they've also changed and altered the original content in order to spread some sort of messaging. There has been numerous times with localization issues, and so that's why people pirate. And also because, like, if you look at Pokemon, if you love Pokemon, you wanna watch all of the Pokemon seasons. Where can I watch each Pokemon season on streaming sites? You essentially, let's look it up. It's the Pokemon website, all right. On Netflix, we have season 1 for Horizons, then the beginning, which is basically like Ash Ketchum's original series. So basically, we have season 1, and then what about season 2 and all the way to 16? They're nowhere to be seen. We have only 17 to 19, and then from 9, and then after that 20 to 22. They're gone. And then, well, if we want to watch, if we wanted to watch season 3 to 5, well, it's on Prime Video. But where is season 2? Nowhere to be seen. And then season 6 to 22, not here, basically. And black and white seasons, basically, seasons 14 to 16, well, this is already covered. Oh, it's basically here. So we have it. We have part of what's missing from here. And then 17, 19, well, we already have that. And then Journeys, I already have that. And then, oh, Amazon Prime and then Prime Video channels. Okay, so this is season 2. But why is there 2 Prime Videos? What the heck is this? What is this? Whatever. So you have in 2 different Amazons, you have season 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 9, 10 to 13, and then 14 to 16, and then 17 to 19. And then so we need 20 and 22 basically. Oh, it's here, Sun and Moon. 2022, and then Journeys 23-25, and I believe that would be it, right? Basically. But then, of course, we're having the issue of the Pokemon movies. So if you want to specifically watch a Pokemon movie, well, where could you see it? And then there's also Pokemon Trainer Tour. Is this a movie? I don't know. We have also movies here. So it's like, again, it's just spread out everywhere, and you really can't. You would essentially need to have a Netflix subscription and 2 Amazon subscriptions in order to watch everything, basically. And that's like, Netflix is around 25, I believe, and then Amazon will be like 25 as well, I guess. That would be $50 a month just to watch all of this. And that's just, and if the more you prolong, but here's the thing, if you already have a Netflix subscription, why would you buy an Amazon Prime subscription, like, just for Pokemon? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like a fair use of your money. So might as well just pirate the whole thing, because that's basically what's going on. And again, Netflix, when it comes to anime, it doesn't have everything. And then the same thing with Crunchyroll, it also doesn't have everything. There is some anime that's only exclusively available in Japan, and it's only available outside by the sub studios, basically, or by fan subs that are way more better and accurate than localizers hired by Crunchyroll. But regardless, the reason this is related to the UK censorship stuff is that piracy. The thing with pirate sites is that you don't really have to create an account in order to watch anime or any sort of content, any sort of like movies or shows. So you basically, because you don't need to create an account, you essentially don't need to give up your government ID. That's why this is important. Because let's suppose that every single legal site like Netflix, YouTube, Crunchyroll, and Hulu, Disney Plus, Paramount Pictures, Amazon Prime, they all are basically now forced by the government to require users to give up their government ID in order to verify that they are an adult. And well, if you're a normal person, you wouldn't want to give up your government ID because that's an overreach of your privacy. So you would rely on piracy basically. But now that the government is trying to block pirate sites, the government is literally forcing you to give up your government ID. So you can no longer go or and bypass the censorship stuff. And here's the problem with giving up your government ID is that in the case of the US government, this basically allows the US government to basically monitor what content you consume on the internet. And that means that whatever the current administration of the American government wants censored will be censored. Whether that's something that has like an anti-American sentiment or something that just criticizes America, or maybe something that isn't related to the country at all, but more it has to do with, say, morals or ethics. Like, for example, there are plenty of politicians in the West, especially in America, that have something against anime. They do. And if you don't believe me, we can look up clips where politicians demonize anime. I'm talking about back then when they literally said anime was demonic. Like back then, that's what people used to. And if you don't believe me, we can ask Copilot. They're having scattered instances where US politicians or public figures have made negative remarks about anime, often in context of broader cultural or media criticisms. They don't reflect official policy, but rather personal opinions. And even though, and here's the thing, now that the government has the ability to monitor what content people consume, they can basically region lock the West or specifically the United States or whatever your country of residence is. Like if you're British, the British government can now censor whatever content you want. And here's the thing, you will not notice what has been censored. You will not notice it. And you will no, here's the thing. You will not notice what has been censored if you don't know what has been censored. But if you like anime and you consume a lot of content that's critical of your current administration or your country as a whole, either its culture or its politics or social dynamics, anything that's negative, if you will consume that kind of content, or you consume certain kinds of anime that are morally controversial, or consume certain types of video games, or even movies, or TV shows that are critical or negative of the government or the country or the society where you live in, where you currently live in, if you consume that type of content, you will know that it has been censored if by the next time you want to look up that specific show or content is gone. Like for example, The Voice. The Voice is a TV show that mainly criticizes the right-wing people. Like Homelander is basically meant to be like a quote-unquote representation of Trump, and his allies and the people that support him are basically, like the anti-woke crowd and the right-wing people. Well, guess who, aside from the Democrats and left-wing people in the U.S., hates shows like The Boys? Left-wing parties in other countries. And that's basically most of Europe, with the exception of Italy. But the thing is that The Boys, even though The Boys is trying to mock the right-wing people, it also highlights how flawed left-wing people are. Like, does The Boys criticize left-wing people? Not really. Okay. So yeah, it's mainly meant to be against right-wing stuff and authoritarianism and corporate power. Okay. So I was wrong. But here's the thing. The Voice doesn't give the left a free pass either. For example, the character Victoria Newman. Oh, this girl. the Middle Eastern president or politician that eventually gets killed. A progressive politician model loosely on AOC is revealed to have sinister motives, suggesting that even seemingly righteous figures can be corrupt. So it's mainly towards the right, but it has an occasional jab at the left. So no, I was right. I was right. It does make fun at how flawed left wing people can be. Like left wing politicians and even some followers, they may look heroic and righteous, but once the cameras are turned off, they are as bad as the bad people that you would consider would be right wing people in the case of the boys. And yeah, but in reality, I don't generalize. I try not to generalize unless the majority or the most loud figures that represent either side tend to be bad. Like for example, during the like before Trump, the right wing was pretty much just a bunch of neocon people, and they were all just sellouts. They were all supporting interventionism and policies that basically had American taxpayer go to basically any country that is in America. So it's just wasted money, wasted taxpayer money that could have been spent for helping poor people or helping homeless people or actually maintaining and cleaning the infrastructure of like different countries. But no, so yeah, so back then right wing people were pretty much like they didn't represent America at all. But the Democrats also didn't either. But they just so happened at the time to be more focused on trying to help things at a national level. But then Trump came along, and when compared to Hillary Clinton, Trump is just a better choice. But obviously, Bernie Sanders, he had a fair shot to compete against Trump, but there was a problem. Bernie Sanders he was kicked out. He was denied. He was denied the ability to represent the Democrat Party. So essentially, people just prefer Trump over Hillary Clinton. Like if Bernie Sanders had won, things would have been much more interesting, in my opinion. And given how the political stuff was at the time, Bernie Sanders could have won the presidency at that point. He could have been. And God knows how things would have changed since then. Because eventually, I'm sure Trump would have still won. Like, again, and it all depends. Why do political people, they get more recognition and more popularity? It's because time proves them right. That's why. Because at first, they may seem like crazy people, and you will of course just ignore them. But as time happens, you start to think back of that crazy person, and you're like, damn, that crazy person was right on some things. And so, even though this crazy person has policies that I disagree with, it's a fair shot to at least see the things that I agree with. So you support that person. That's crazy. That's what happened with Trump. And then of course you had COVID, and COVID happened, and Biden just seemed like a hopeful thing, because Trump's response to the COVID thing, it was just, it was bad. It was bad. So obviously people were tired and fed up of the lockdowns, because if I remember, I think it was him. Did Trump order the lockdowns? It's a bit nuanced. It's hard to know, but it did issue guidelines that would basically be followed up by Biden. So he did not mandate it, but he recommended. So in a way, this is a great example of like both parties being on agreement and having their interests aligned on certain topics. And this is the case basically. And so Trump gave governors to issue lockdowns, and then Biden just amplified it by ordering it, like without the ability to say no to the states. So it was a boat. It was a thing. It was a collaboration between the two. But again, people were tired at that moment. People wanted a solution. They wanted an easy solution, and Biden was that solution. And then, of course, you had the whole censorship about the vaccine. You couldn't question or criticize the vaccine. And of course, you had the Joe Rogan scandal with MSNBC, I believe, where they try to basically alter his skin color to make it seem like the alternative medicine he decided to consume was basically like they were trying to discredit him. So yeah, that whole thing happened. And then of course you have the fact that every time Biden was on live camera, he seemed to not act like a proper person. Like he didn't seem like right of mind. And what happened to Biden is just unfortunate basically, because that's something that happens to all people. It can happen to anyone. So it's not just it can happen to anyone. And really, the one thing that frustrates me the most is the fact that the government at the time they tried to deny that it was going on, and in my opinion that isn't transparency at all. And yeah, and so obviously like you could say that Biden's presidency was basically a period of basically trying to deal with the COVID pandemic, and then after that it was like as if we never had a president at all, and everything was run by the people who basically were right below Biden, which basically includes Kamala Harris, his wife, and other higher elite Democrats. And so yeah, but regardless, talking about politicians, the thing, parasites and everything, for example, The Boys, it definitely criticizes right wing politics. So, for example, in the UK, as I said in the previous live stream, in the UK, if they decide to censor, if the people decide to vote for the Conservative Party, which is basically the right wing, eventually, you know what the Conservative Party will do? The one thing they will not do is basically remove the law that allows them to basically, have access to people's government IDs, and have the special police force to actually enforce their internet mandates. And so if the people choose a right wing, the Conservative Party, for like other reasons that have to do with like more like actual British and UK politics, like internal stuff that I am unaware of, or like who knows basically. But eventually the Conservative Party will rise, it will be in power, and it will use this law that was passed by the Labour Party. And so with this law, what they will do is they will censor The Boys because, it criticizes right wing politics. And then something that criticizes left wing politics are something like South Park and Family Guy. Now, realistically, Family Guy and South Park, they both criticize all types of politics. So they are the most neutral in my opinion. That's why people love them. That's why they're the most consumed. And so basically, if you live anywhere in Europe and you love South Park and Family Guy, well, those could be censored by either party, either left wing or right wing party. It will be censored, or at the very least, the episodes that explicitly criticize left wing or right wing politics, depending on what the current ruling government is in Europe. It depends, of course, because that's literally what they can do. And piracy would be a way to bypass censorship. But now that they're trying to basically make it inaccessible, it's now going to be bad. And here's the thing. Efforts to introduce a parasite block into the United States continue with the introduction of BlockBeard bill in the Senate. The bipartisan proposal, bipartisan, highlight on bipartisan. This means that in America, at the very least, both the left-wing party and the right-wing party, basically the Democrats and the Republicans, they're both in agreement of trying to block these pirate sites. And the reason as to why they're trying to block these pirate sites is so that by the time they manage to get the law that allows them to have access to Americans' government IDs, they can effectively now leave Americans without the ability to bypass this requirement of giving up their government ID. And basically, in other words, both parties want to control what Americans consume, and that's bad. And people need to call it out. I for example, I am. Last time I voted, which was my first time voting, I subscribed to the Democrat Party and I voted for Kamala Harris. Now, obviously, now I regret voting for her, but at the same time, it seems like I wouldn't have voted for Trump either, even though I do think he has some good policies and good ideas. But it's just that there's some things that Trump's policies has like, that kind of like affects me on a personal level, but that's about it. It's not, and I don't really hate Trump. I'm someone who barely has any hatred. I can barely hate people. I don't. But I do disagree, and I try to come up with logical responses. I try not to be as emotional. Of course, don't want to forget my emotions because, I try to find a balance. Like, again, and I would just straight up say it. The one thing I disagree with Trump is the immigration policy thing. That's why I don't think I would have voted for him. But compared to Kamala Harris, I can see why he's much more better than her. And saying, yeah, notepad, yeah, this is basically like this is how I would solve the illegal immigration. Militarize 24/7 the southern border, deport every illegal that has a violent record, and then anyone that is basically is left behind, if followed properly, they would all be hardworking and innocent illegals basically. And I would legalize them. I would basically make them have green cards. And of course, I would have them go through this test, Do you agree to having the green card with the condition that you'll be America first? It's just an oath, basically. Kind of like how you take the oath of allegiance whenever you gain the American citizenship as an immigrant. Like, I had to go through that. And so, yeah. And then, of course, expand the work visa program so that even the most poor foreigner can come to the U.S. and work legally. But of course, they'll be taxed and they'll be offered the same labor rights as legal immigrants and Americans. This would mean that this would basically make it so that they cannot compete with Americans by and legal immigrants by basically working for cheap. They will not be able to work for cheap. They would basically work for the same wages. And so at that point, yeah. And then of course draconian jail time for employers that knowingly hired illegals. Because at the end of the day, even if you deport illegals, they will just come back. They will, guaranteed. And right now, the reason you barely see them is because of the military being at the southern border. But eventually, there will be a politician or a president or an administration that will get rid of the military in the southern border, and it essentially gives free access to the illegals. So they'll just come back. So if you really want to solve it, you have to put the employers in jail, because once you put them in jail, no one will want to risk hiring people for cheap there will be no business owner that will risk their freedom just to save a couple bucks. No, there will be no one. And then after steps 1 to 5 are implemented, just deport any foreigner that tries to enter the US illegally. Like, that would be it, basically. Because this is basically like a Reagan amnesty, but on steroids. Like, yeah, because I think what Reagan tried to do was, what was he talking about? Yeah, this is basically like a Reagan amnesty, but on steroids. Because I think what Reagan tried to do was something similar, but he wanted a secure border, but he couldn't maintain it because back then there was no one with the will to actually secure the border. So yeah, but again, this military southern border, it will require active bipartisan cooperation. Like, this whole thing requires active bipartisan cooperation. That's it. But yeah, that's about it. This is the main thing. And again, the reason why I mainly support this, it's not like to virtue signal or like it's not like to birth the signal or anything. It's mainly because it's because just I'm just gonna be honest. I know some people that are illegal, and obviously like I wouldn't want to see them gone. The ones I do want to see gone are the ones that are basically criminals, that are basically doing crimes, being violent, and if they are just being lazy and not working, yeah, get them out of here. But the ones that I do know, they're definitely hardworking, and I wouldn't want to see them gone. So that's why I'm kind of like more of a on the middle with the whole illegal issue stuff. So yeah, this isn't like, if I personally didn't know any illegal, I'd be like, yeah, get them out. But I do happen to know some of them. So that's why. This is more of a personal thing. But again, you are free to disagree. That's what free speech is all about. Even if we disagree on things, we have to protect each other's right to be able to say whatever we have. So yeah, like, here's this little update I wanted to have with Hero Hei. Like, the fact that, yeah, pirate sites are trying to be blocked. So let's see what he has to say about this.
Taken, which I might. And lastly, we've also got some news over in the US. This article from torrentfreak.com saying U.S. senators introduce new pirate site blocking bill, BlockBeard. Now, it's actually a very wordy article, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will go over, for about a minute or so, what I find to be some of the highlight areas. Earlier this year, U.S. Rep. Zoe Lofgren introduced a new pirate site blocking bill titled the Foreign Anti-Digital Piracy Act, BADPA. This week, a similar proposal was introduced by Senators Tillis, Coons, Blackburn, and Schiff. The bipartisan bill titled Block Bad Electronic Art and Recording Distributors, BlockBeard, aims to introduce a legal mechanism for rights holders to request site blocking orders. The site blocking proposal seeks to amend U.S. copyright law, enabling rights holders to request federal courts to designate online locations as a foreign digital piracy site, quote unquote. If that succeeds, courts can subsequently order U.S. service providers to block access to these sites. Pirate site designation would be dependent on rights holders showing that they are harmed by a site's activities, that reasonable efforts have been made to notify the site's operator, and that a reasonable investigation confirms the operator is not located within the U.S. Additionally, rights holders must show that the site is primarily designed for piracy, has limited commercial purpose, or is intentionally marketed by its operator to promote copyright infringing activities. If the court classifies a website as a foreign pirate site, rights holders can go back to court to request a blocking order. At this stage, the court will determine whether it is technically and practically feasible for ISPs to block the site and consider any potential harm to the public interest. The granted orders would stay in place for a year with the option to extend if necessary. If blocked sites switch to new locations, the court can also amend blocking orders to include new IP addresses and domain names. So yeah, BlockBeard and FADPA do seem to be very similar, mainly differing in the whole DNS resolver part of the proposals and the judicial process that they are also proposing. I could have phrased that better, but yeah. And that's the final thing I wanted to go over in this video, so I'll leave it there. As always, thank you for tuning in. I know it was kind of a gloomy video in many ways, you know, lots of disturbing stuff going on to say the least. But regardless, I do hope you enjoyed my coverage, and thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed, please consider liking and or subscribing. It helps out greatly. Look forward to seeing you here in the comments and in the next one.
Yeah. Again, he's absolutely right. It's suspicious. It's suspicious, and given everything else that's been going on with the censorship stuff, it's definitely something to be concerned about. Go give it an actual watch. And as Voltaire once said it, I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. But it was coined by Evelyn Beatrice Hall. So both of them, basically, they both said it. And this is the thing. We may disagree, but we have to defend each other's right to say what the very words that we disagree upon. Because I wouldn't want to live in a world where I cannot hear the other side, even if I may think some of the arguments may be straight up ridiculous or just illogical. And again, the ones who should be mad at this the most should be the apolitical people and the people that are like neutral or somewhere along the middle.